Hey, Steve Mignani here doing the Junkyard Crawl at Bernardston Auto Wrecking in Bernardston, Massachusetts with a 1970 Ford LTD. Now the LTD arrived in 1965 as Ford's most plush full-sized car. By 1970 it was available as a two-door, a four-door, a wagon, and even a convertible. So they were pretty well expanded upon. But here's the thing, full-size Fords in 1970 did the heavy lifting. In fact, there were 850,000 full-size Fords sold in 1970. Now here's the thing, some would say, well, a Mustang and the Maverick were a big deal. They probably sold like crazy. Well, here's the thing, Maverick accounted for 23% of Ford sales. Fairlane and Torino, 21% of Ford sales. Mustang, 10% of Ford sales in 1970. Thunderbird, 2.6%. Full-size cars, 43%. And again, 850,000 of these full-size Fords were sold in 1970. So again, the Mustang was popular, but this is the car that really made the profits for Ford. Now this is kind of a weird one. It is a four-door, but it's also a four-door sedan. Now the LTD was available as a hardtop without the fixed B-pillar and with windows that went down and nothing but air. And in fact, of those 850,000 full-size Fords, only 78,306 were built with the hardtop sedan, or the sedan body style. And here's the thing, if you got the sedan, you got these vent windows right here. If you got the hardtop without the vent, you got no vent. Interesting stuff. So again, getting back to that sedan body, it's all about the fixed door pillars, these things right here, the door frames, and the little vent right here. It's kind of cool. This is hand operated, a little crank wheel. Still works, kind of cool right there. And this one here has power mirror, I guess. Apparently it's gone. The mirror is gone. Oh, here it is, right here. Here is the remote mirror right here. It's not power, but again, it runs with a cable inside the door. It's got arthritis, but that would, there we go, kind of work like that. And again, another part of the sedan architecture, of course. Once again, oh, okay, well, the fixed window glass right here and this hard B-pillar right there. Again, an LTD hardtop would have nothing but open air right through here. Now this one here is an automatic, no stick shifts in 1970, but we can see here the lifeguard design, cockpit style instrument panel, first seen in 1968 and actually emulated by the AMC Javelin in 1971, if you look at it. But the weird thing about this is where the radio is. On the left-hand side of the steering column, up at the top corner, that's where the radio is. Kind of weird. So if you're the passenger in this car, well, you ain't going to be messing with the radio dials because you have to reach across the driver's arms and face in order to get to that radio. Kind of an unusual location. That's the base AM radio. Speaking of which, here is American Car Prices, 1970, and this tells us all about the new vehicles, of course, the new Firebird, Gremlin, Corvette, Camaro. But inside here on the Ford page, we can see right here, the standard equipment was the 351 two-barrel on the LTD, but for an extra $103 cost or retail, 131, 390 two-barrel, or the 429 two-barrel for $213, or the big dog, the 429 360 horse four-barrel for $242. Other details here, positive traction rear axle, only $43, not a bad deal. And again here, cruise-o-matic, automatic with first gear lockout, $7. That was for police forces who, they didn't want cops banging down in the first gear and blowing up the engine. So again, that was the lockout. And again, more police stuff here on this side here. The alternator is a Lease Neville for 80 or $95. And again, that was a police item right there, Lease Neville. Or if you had a trailer package and maybe wanted extra electrical capacity, you might get the Lease Neville. But generally, that was a police thing. Now, the LTD came standard with the 351. And here we have it here. Now it's not a Boss 351, that would arrive in 71, a whole different creature. This is the 351 Windsor, and we take a peek here at this one. And here's the air cleaner, kind of cool. I love how Ford had these orange stickers with the checkered flags and the 351 cubic inches. But this one is just a two-barrel. This is the Ford Autolite style motorcraft, whatever you want to call it, two-barrel carburetor. And this is a Windsor, not a Cleveland. In other words, this has inline valves and, you know, decent heads. But with that said, the Cleveland 351 had canted valves and was a little better in the power department. But again, the 351 two-barrel was the base engine in the LTD, whereas the Ford Custom and Galaxies could be had with 6 cylinders and I think the 302 small block. But the 351 was standard. Now, we don't have them here, but the LTD also got standard front disc brakes, which have been liberated for some other application, Meanwhile, lesser Customs and Galaxies had 11-inch drums up front. You had to pay extra for the discs, but again, LTD, you got, for the extra money, you got disc brakes up front. This one does have air conditioning, $389, well spent on a hot summer day like this is today. But here's the Ford-specific compressor, sort of a piston-type deal, sideways deal. Very different from the Frigidaire rotary-style stuff from GM, and of course Chrysler's V-twin air temp stuff. But again, this is again, body on frame construction. We can see the frame poking out from under the firewall. The frame is a very separate thing. The body sits down on top of it. And getting back to the transmissions, this one has the 3-speed automatic, but this is the 1969 Ford catalog right there. And here's the LTD. And by the way, starting in 68 through 70, 71, LTDs had hidden headlights, whereas lesser Fords had exposed lights. And of course, the front clip on this thing is gone, but it would have had the hideaway headlights, kind of a cool deal. But getting back to it, powertrain selections, check this out. 1969, you could get in an LTD a 429 Thunderjet with a 4-speed manual transmission. Crazy but true. Can you imagine a 4-door LTD with a 429 and a 4-speed? How cool would that have been? And this being a 1970 doesn't have the 5-mile-per-hour bumpers, which arrived in like 73. So as a result, we see the bumper would have affixed to these dead plates here at the end of the frame. And again, by 73, 74, there would be shock absorbers and all kinds of elaborate, goofy stuff to, well, to prevent permanent damage. If you had an impact at 5 miles per hour, the bumper would squeeze back. But in 1970, just good old-fashioned solidly mounted bumpers. We'll come around to this side here, and we can see, of course, you know, Ford's classic twin A-arm suspension, the upper clamshell or A-arm right here, the coil spring below, the lower control arm, and again, the spindles and disc brakes are gone here, probably for retrofitment onto a drum brake equipped Galaxy or Custom 300. Nothing wrong with that. And if you want, we'll scoot around here, Shane, if you would. Super Shane Richardson, cameraman extraordinaire. And something interesting at the other end of the Ford lineup for 1970 was the Falcon, okay? Now the Falcon, we all remember right here, 67, 68, 69, 70, this kind of awkward square looking car, of course, grew out of the 1960 Ford Falcon. Well, this was used until midway through 1970 when a whole new Falcon arrived, Falcon for 70 and a half. Basically, it's a Torino. But it's an interesting thing that 1970 saw 2 Falcons being sold the same year. These were bigger, better cars, but again, the Falcon could be had with any engine right up to the 429 with a 4-speed, and a handful of those were built. But the Falcon was basically Ford's cheap car above Maverick, which was also new for 1970. Of course, 1971 brought the Pinto, and basically Ford got into the subcompact market. But again, this is a 4-door sedan. I say sedan and shut up is what I like to say, but again, this one has the Ford 9-inch rear axle. Here's the end of it right there. We can see the telltale holes, those 3 holes. That means it's a large bearing 9-inch with perhaps 31, but probably 28 spline axle shafts. But underneath this deck lid, a 9-inch rear axle, which is a little wide, but the center section might be a limited slip. We want to look at the trim tag to see that. And generally speaking, a letter is better than a number. The letter would indicate generally on passenger cars of this period, a limited slip differential. Now, inside the trunk of this thing, we're going to find out what's in there. The beauty is the trunk lock has been liberated. It's gone, which means we can use a screwdriver, but I think we might have a surprise in there. So Shane, take a look at that. This is the high stakes close for this video. It's not BitClake, but we might have a wasp attack on Steve Magnanti. You might be my last appearance before I go to the hospital with an immune reaction because of the wasps that are about to come out of this thing. Let's roll the dice and see. Here we go. Maybe fast forward this bit, Shane. Oh, here we go. Okay, no wasps so far. And what's inside here, I have no idea. It might be a set of Boss 429 cylinder heads. Okay, well, no wasps. I always look underneath the deck lid. There might be a big old baseball sitting right there, but no wasps. That's cool. No Hornets. Cool. And in the trunk, nothing too exotic. Well, okay. Got the gas mask ready to rock in case World War III breaks out or whatever. Who knows? Who can say? Now, the cool thing about these full-size Fords from 65 on up is how they have a very deep trunk. In fact, the spare tire sits up over the rear axle. The gas tank's up inside of there. In fact, we saw a Mercury Park Lane In a previous video, they had similar architecture underneath. But again, a huge trunk in here, lots of room for all kinds of stuff. And this one's a factory black car. Kind of unusual, I dare say, that unless you're talking Cadillacs or Lincolns, very few cars were ordered new in black because of the maintenance and the fact that black paint looks pretty nasty if you don't keep it clean all the time. But that's the story of the 1974 LTD four-door sedan. And remember, in 1970, everybody remembers the Mustang, but the reality is only 10% of all Ford sales were Mustangs, whereas 43% of all sales were big cars like this. So if you like this video, be sure to subscribe to the Steve Maggs YouTube channel, share this with your friends, give us a thumbs up, and hit the bell so you're aware of the next video, which hits tomorrow morning.